Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. His third and final stop before heading home, President Moon Jae-in is in New Zealand on a state visit. We have the latest on his schedule in Auckland. Pay more at the supermarket and at the pump. South Korea's consumer prices jumped 2% on year in November. That's the biggest gain in well over a year. Plus, up and away. A South Korean satellite tasked with carrying out space observation is successfully launched from an Air Force base in California. Our top story this morning, President Moon Jae-in met with his counterpart from New Zealand within the past couple of hours or so, where the two leaders vowed to expand cooperation between the two countries. This is the final leg of the South Korean leader's 8-day tour, which has taken him around the world to the Czech Republic, Argentina, and of course, New Zealand. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun starts us off.
Trade, defense, new industry, and Antarctic research. These are the areas, according to President Moon Jae-in, where Seoul and Wellington have agreed to further boost cooperation in order to enhance their 56-year-long bilateral relationship. The summit meeting between President Moon and Jacinda Ardin, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, took place on Tuesday morning local time, during which the South Korean president noted that New Zealand is not only an important partner for the Moon administration's new southern policy, but a country that shares a common goal with South Korea.
중일인과 나는 포용적 성장과 지속 가능 개발을 추구하는 그런 공통된 국정 철학을 가지고 있습니다. 앞으로 종류님과 함께 양국 관계를 더욱 호혜적이고 미래지향적으로 발전시켜 나가기를 희망합니다.
During their meeting, the two leaders agreed that the free trade agreement between Korea and New Zealand, which took effect in 2015, has become a solid foundation to promote trade and investment between the two countries, and pledged to continue such cooperation, especially by synergizing the strengths of both countries, New Zealand's agriculture and South Korea's infrastructure construction technology. Another technological collaboration will take place in Antarctic research, fusing New Zealand's vast experience as the original signee of the Antarctic Treaty and state-of-the-art research technologies developed by South Korea. The leaders also welcomed the scheduled launch of New Zealand's new South Korea-made military supply ship in 2019 and discussed ways to further expand the country's people-to-people exchanges. During the joint press conference, President Moon and Prime Minister Ardin confirmed New Zealand's support for South Korea's efforts to establish peace on the peninsula. When asked about North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's proposed visit to Seoul, President Moon insisted there is a possibility that it to take place within the year. He emphasized, however, what's more important than whether the visit will happen within the year or not is to realize Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul may lead to greater progress on North Korea's denuclearization. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has unveiled a 5-year development plan to ensure inter-Korean relations keep moving forward. Seoul is hoping to declare a formal end to the Korean War and create an institutional base for sustainable cross-border ties. Oh Jung-hee with the details.
Pushing forward with peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula and forming an institutional framework to preserve warm inter-Korean ties. That's the plan South Korea released Monday, a blueprint of its future relations with North Korea for the next 5 years. According to Seoul's Unification Ministry, South Korea will declare a formal end to the Korean War and hold 3-way or 4-way talks with relevant parties to sign a peace treaty. But the government is aware that it may not be able to declare the war's end within this year as it initially hoped for, and has said there is flexibility on how and when the declaration can be made. Within the next 5 years, Seoul plans to sign a peace treaty with North Korea that institutionalizes their relations. It's to keep inter-Korean exchanges sustainable and prevent them from being affected by ups and downs in their relations. Steady dialogue will be maintained between the leaders of Seoul and Pyongyang through regular summit talks and hotline calls. Running the joint liaison office in a stable manner is also a must, with future hopes of opening more offices in the Korea's capitals. The Seoul government also hopes to encourage North Korea to engage further with the international community. It aims to provide support for cultivating manpower in the north and for holding international conferences that involve Pyongyang's experts. It's also to seek ways to cooperate with international financial institutions to deliver development aid to the north. Humanitarian aid for the north will be provided irrespective of political situations. They'll be mainly for emergency operations, control of contagious diseases like tuberculosis and malaria, and support for babies and pregnant women. 우정희, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed he's ready to hold a second summit with North Korea's leader within the next few months, early next year. Watchers say it could signal a fresh start in the two sides' nuclear negotiations that have stalled quite badly in recent months. Our Park Hee-jun reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump has reaffirmed that his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will probably take place early next year. Speaking to reporters on his return trip from the G20 summit in Argentina, Trump said he expects the meeting to happen in January or February. He also said 3 locations are being considered for the summit, adding it will be held, quote, within plane distance. Although he did not elaborate on whose plane he was referring to, it raises speculation the next Kim-Trump summit will again take place in Asia. Asked whether Kim would visit the U.S., President Trump only said he will at some point. Kim Jong-un's private jet is only capable of flying to Asian countries that are not so far from the north. The remarks bring countries such as Vietnam, Mongolia, or Indonesia under the spotlight, as all 3 have North Korean embassies. President Trump's comments are seen as a positive sign amid a stall in the denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Watchers say it reflects the Trump administration's unwavering commitment to maintaining dialogue with the North. The South Korean government has also taken the wheel in finding a way to restart the two sides' negotiations as seen through the Moon-Trump summit last week. Where working-level negotiations failed, top-down negotiations are now adding momentum to North Korea diplomacy. Now, it's up to the North Korean leader to make a decision. There's only a short period of time until the proposed date for the next North Korea-U.S. summit, and experts say only Kim Jong-un's will can make it happen. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, after the leaders of the world's 2 biggest economies agreed to a temporary pause in their trade war, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin has made it clear there's only one person leading the trade negotiations with China, and that person, as you might imagine, is President Trump. Mnuchin also stressed the U.S. expects immediate action from Beijing on its trade commitments that it made at last week's G20 summit in Argentina. Lee-Seung Jae with the details.
Speaking on the CNBC show Squawk Box on Monday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin revealed President Trump himself will be the main person in charge of leading crunch trade negotiations with China. Those remarks were echoed by President Trump himself, who noted his good personal relationship with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in a tweet on Monday. According to Trump, he and President Xi are the only 2 people that can bring about massive and very positive change on trade and far beyond, adding a solution for North Korea would also be a great thing for China and the rest of the world. At the G20 summit in Argentina last weekend, the 2 leaders agreed to a temporary truce, with President Trump agreeing to maintain 10% tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods and not raise them to 25%. In exchange, China offered more than $1.2 trillion in additional commitments on trade. China also agreed to lift tariffs, including reducing its 40% tariff on American cars, which Mnuchin expects will eventually fall to 0. Despite the major agreements, none of the commitments were agreed to in writing, and the specifics have yet to be hammered out. Despite Mnuchin's earlier comments on President Trump leading trade negotiations with China, Trump named U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer to lead the talks with Beijing. The move was confirmed on Monday by White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro, who called Lighthizer Washington's toughest negotiator. With the pause in place, the 90-day period begins on January 1st, with the two countries expected to continue talks throughout that period. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So, as we heard there, Washington and Beijing agreed at the G20 summit in Argentina not to slap more duties on each other, for now at least. According to the Korea International Trade Association, the decision may have been made because both countries are facing an economic slowdown. Go Ryun-hee reports.
Korea International Trade Association announced on Sunday their analysis on why the world's two biggest economies have agreed on a temporary ceasefire in their trade war. The association says the 90-day truce was necessary because of the two countries' economic situation. For one, China's GDP growth slowed to 6.5% on-year in the third quarter, down 0.2 percentage points from the second quarter, and marking the weakest on-year quarterly increase since 2009 during the global financial crisis. Kita added that consumption and investment in China is also slowing down. This comes after the U.S. imposed 25% tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese technology goods, including machinery, semiconductors, and autos in July and August. The economic situation is similarly grim for the United States. Major news outlets reported that plunging sales in automobiles and houses were signaling an economic slowdown. For instance, the Washington Post reported last month that General Motors layoffs and plant shutdowns suggest that the U.S. economy may be starting to slow down. Kita says the overall situation might have forced President Trump's hands to negotiate with Xi. A manager at Kita points out another important issue in Saturday's agreement: an existing timeline.
The most important part of Saturday's agreement is the 90-day timeline on the bilateral negotiations. This means that the United States won't wait forever until the two sides reach an agreement.
Meanwhile, although Korean companies earn more time to prepare for the trade war, Kita says the government and companies should prepare for additional tariffs possible next year. Ko-Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
A small South Korean satellite designed to carry out space observation was successfully launched on Monday from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. SpaceX's Falcon 9 blasted off at around 10:30 a.m. local time. It was carrying 64 satellites, including South Korea's NextSat-1. The satellite will reach an altitude of 575 kilometers and measure space radiation and observe stars' infrared rays for the next 2 years. Seoul's Ministry of Science and the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology will announce detailed results of the launch in the coming hours. South Korea's consumer prices jumped 2% on year in November on the back of rising agricultural and petroleum goods prices. According to Statistics Korea, on Tuesday, consumer prices have risen 2% for 2 consecutive months after remaining in the 1% range for 12 months straight. Vegetable prices rose by more than 14% on year. Prices of petroleum goods increased more than 6%. However, the agency pointed out that prices of oil-related products decreased on month after the government slashed domestic transport fuel taxes by 15% for 6 months starting November 6th. The Bank of Korea says South Korea's GDP for the July to September period rose 0.6% on quarter. That's on line with the central bank's expectation and on par with the quarterly growth seen in Q2. On an annualized basis, GDP gained 2% on year, slower than the 2.8% growth seen in the second quarter and also the lowest figure in 9 years. Real gross national income expanded 0.7% on quarter but fell 0.2% on year. Now, temporary employees here in South Korea generally earn less and have lower job security than their permanent counterparts. To tackle the issue, the Moon administration has been working to convert temporary public sector workers to full-timers. Regarding the efforts, the Bank of Korea says more permanent workers would be a net positive to the local economy. Kim Hae-sung reports.
If the proportion of permanent employees in the workforce rises by 1 percentage point and that of temporary workers goes down by the same margin, overall labor productivity could go up by 0.23 to 0.56%. That's according to a joint report by the Bank of Korea and Hanyang University, which compared 29 OECD countries' labor structure and productivity-related data between 2006 and 2015. Korea has continuously fared low among OECD countries in terms of labor productivity at $67,000 per worker as of 2015, lower than the OECD average of $85,000. It shows that in 2015, the proportion of permanent workers in Korea was 57.5%, up from 50% back in 2006, but still far lower than the OECD average of about 74%. The report said hiring more permanent workers could enhance productivity as temporary workers have lower work engagement and continuity that negatively affects productivity due to job insecurity and lower wages. But the report cautioned that if the percentage of permanent workers leads to higher payrolls that outweigh the value of added productivity, labor costs could put a dent on corporate profits. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, the birth rate is exceedingly low here in South Korea, but data from the nation's Statistics Bureau shows infants born in the country last year are expected to live an average of more than 80 years. The trend is mainly being driven by continued advancements in healthcare and technology. Oh Soo-young with the details.
South Koreans are expected to live longer than ever before. According to Statistics Korea, an infant born last year is expected to live 82.7 years, which is 0.3 years longer than 2016 and nearly 4 years longer than the decade before. Excluding South Koreans aged 90 and above, the average remaining life expectancy increased for all age groups by roughly 0.3 years. A 40-year-old woman is likely to live another 47 years, while a man of the same age is expected to live 41 years more. Compared to the 1980s, when the average life expectancy for men was 8 years shorter than that of women, the gap has now been reduced to 6 years, 0.1 year lower than last year. Women are now expected to live until they're almost 86 years old, while men are likely to live until they're nearly 80. Both figures beat the OECD's average figures at 83.3 years for women and 77.9 years for men. In fact, South Korean women have the third longest lifespan among their OECD peers from 35 other countries.
It seems Koreans are doing more to take care of their health, and the level of medical care and technology is also increasing, which helps early diagnosis and treatment of diseases. This is also true for men who seem to be drinking and smoking less than before and doing more exercise. So their death rate has been declining.
Although the country's lifespan has been seeing an upward trend, Statistics Korea stresses there's also been an increase of deaths caused by pneumonia. The data agency says the respiratory condition is now the third most probable cause of death for South Koreans born last year, following cancer and heart disease. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has issued an appeal to world leaders to do more to tackle climate change. He was speaking at the opening of the UN Climate Change Conference in Poland on Monday, where delegates from across the world will negotiate on how to at least try and tackle the issue. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our No Aram. So Aram, tell us more.
Well, Mark, the COP24 conference is being described as the most important gathering on climate change since the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement. Over the next 2 weeks, delegates will try to finalise a plan to limit global warming, but however, expectations are very low. Guterres, stressing the urgency of the issue, said climate change was already taking its toll.
We are in trouble. We are in deep trouble with climate change. Climate change is running faster than we are, and we must catch up sooner rather than later before it is too late. For many people, regions, even countries, this is already a matter of life or death.
Guterres added the Paris Agreement was not enough and that more must be done.
So, Paris commitments are not enough to reach the Paris goal. But unfortunately, since Paris, the implementation of those commitments for the majority of the countries has been less ambitious than the commitments themselves. We are off track. We will not reach 2020 with what was promised in Paris, and at the same time, what was promised in Paris is not enough. So we need a huge increase in ambition.
The Paris Accord set a goal of limiting the rise in global temperatures to less than 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2030. Guterres said in order to achieve that, global emissions from 2010 levels to 2030 must be halved. However, the COP24 gathering is already facing some hurdles with a clash of opinions. Host country Poland is proposing a slow approach to ease the financial blow from the move away from fossil fuels. Nations more immediately threatened by climate change, including countries like Fiji, are urging for nations to act now. In other news, Qatar says it is pulling out of OPEC after nearly 60 years as a member of the oil cartel. The announcement was made by Qatar's energy minister on Monday. The Gulf nation will leave beginning next year to focus on natural gas. Qatar is one of the cartel's smallest oil producers, and its withdrawal is expected to not have that much of a big impact on the oil market. Crude prices soared on Monday, but experts attributed the rise to the 90-day truce in the U.S. China trade war. Doha also dismissed suggestions its withdrawal was due to political tensions with Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has submitted a draft bill to his country's parliament which seeks to terminate a friendship treaty with Russia. Tensions have flared between Kiev and Moscow over Russia's seizure of 3 Ukrainian naval ships and their crews last month. Kiev says it wants to terminate the treaty due to what it calls Russian aggression. The treaty was ratified in 1998 and automatically renews every decade unless one side advises the other of its intention to end the agreement. Moving on to some sports news now. Real Madrid midfielder Luka Modric has won the 2018 Ballon d'Or, breaking Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi's decade-long duopoly on the prestigious football award. The 33-year-old Croatian star helped Real Madrid win a 3rd consecutive Champions League title in May and also led Croatia to their first World Cup final, being named player of the tournament despite his side losing to France.
Good morning. Most regions had a rainy start to the day. Rain should let up in the capital area this morning before it all clears by the afternoon. Meanwhile, several cities in northwest China have been covered in yellow snow, a rare sight caused by cold weather and sandstorms in the region. And that's going to have an impact on the Korean peninsula as well. After showers let up today, yellow dust will blow in, raising dust levels mainly in the western parts of the country today. Temperature-wise, it's going to be a few notches lower compared to yesterday, but it will be still bearable. The daily high in Seoul will be at 11 degrees Celsius, while most regions will see highs in the mid-teens this afternoon. Today's round of showers will make way for a cold snap in the country, dropping our daily temperatures dramatically starting Wednesday, and expect to see a low of minus 10 degrees Celsius by Saturday morning here in the capital. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV, and we'll have our next newscast coming up at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.